And welcome to this special on cult fiction, which we concede from the get-go is almost impossible to define, except to say that these are books which gripped your imagination and never let it go. Books which at some stage rewired your head and changed either the way you lived or the way you thought about living. Think Luke Reinhardt's The Dice Man. Think Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, or Catch-22, or The Outsider. Books which became cult for a whole raft of reasons we will be talking about tonight, but there are, I think, at least two common threads. And one is that however you define it, you know a cult book when you see it. You just know. And two, that they have their own unique voice, even if it is a slightly mad or a bad one. So we have built this special round them, our chance to discuss, let's face it, some of the most interesting books ever written, united by nothing but their ability to incite passion in the reader. And because timing is crucial, we've invited four guests of various ages and stages to discuss the phenomenon of cult, starting with Bob Sessions, who has been a book publisher in Australia for over 40 years. Among the first authors he published in the 1960s were Tom Keneally and Ruth Park. In short, this guy has had a bird's eye view on book culture for a hell of a long time. Number two here, Markus Zusak, is an author, an eclectic reader, and he's here tonight for many reasons, but one of them being a fantastically offbeat and beguiling article he wrote about his all-time favourite boxing books for The Guardian. How could we resist? Dave Graney is a singer, writer and raconteur, a subterranean man in the field who has devoted, I believe, an unhealthy amount of time scouring the op shops of the world for obscure pay dirt. And Marieke Hardy is a writer, blogger, regular panellist on... You know that already, don't you? Please welcome them all. Now, cult is by definition a highly idiosyncratic thing. So I've asked each of our guests to do a list of five, their top five. There was one match, that was all. All the others were their own work. So I thought we'd start by asking, what's your top pick? Top pick.
Look, I think a cult book is a book that has a profound effect on you at the time you come across it. My top pick was Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson, because it was published in the 70s. I was probably 30, give or take, and it opened a world to me that I just did not know existed. Here was a story about these guys driving across the Las Vegas desert, stoned out of their minds, and writing about it in a way that you could actually follow, even though I have never been stoned in my life, and I don't know what it's like.
Oh, Bob, you have to say that. You have to say that. And Marcus, top pick.
Well, Catch-22 just came out of the pack for me. I could not resist it. It's a book that polarises. People love it, people loathe it, but the people who loathe it have to admit that they've been in a sticky situation and said, boy, this is a Catch-22, and what an achievement to enter our vernacular and be an entry in the dictionary.
And in fact, do you think loving or hating is actually one of the qualities of being a cult? Because that defines where you stand.
I do, actually, and I mean, it's one of those things where if people love it, and particularly with Catch-22, and this was the reason I chose it, is you love that book and then you love the people in it and you get behind certain characters. Like, some people love Milo and some people detest him even though they love the book. For me, it's Yossarian purely because of the paradox of he's such an anti-hero and he shows such heroics in his cowardice. All he wants is to live. And anyone, and that great quote, anyone is the enemy who wants to kill him, no matter what side they're on. And when you join the Catch-22 cult, that's what you're doing. You're signing up and you're making him live on every time you give the book to someone else. Yeah. And that's why I love that book.
Yeah, so. And that is also a sign of a cult book where, you know, you've got to read this. Yeah. And we'll come back to if they don't like it, do you hate it? Dave, your top pick.
I picked a book, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by M. Barnard, Eldershaw. I got it in a second-hand bookshop.
Of course.
It attracted me because of the story on the back. It's written by two women who wrote books as one identity, Marjorie Barnard and Florence Eldershaw. And it's a book set in the 24th century where they're talking about Sydney between the wars, and it's full of great writing about ideas and history. And it has a history itself. This is a Virago Modern Classic edition, but at the time, 1942, it was heavily censored because they predicted an end to the Second World War where Australia would be dominated by a superpower, America, and there would be a civil insurrection against them, and Sydney would be deserted.
Yes. So let me get the banning was what made the book particularly attractive to you.
And the identity, the identity of the two women, I found fascinating.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because all your other picks are kind of pulp noir, you know, Black Mask, 30s, LA, and this is out of nowhere. Marieke.
Well, I chose Sylvia Plath, The Bell Jar, but with a very specific reason, because I read it last year, and I think if it weren't for that, I might have, if we did this show a year ago, I might have said you need to be an adolescent in order to really view a book as a cult, or certainly maybe in your university years or your early 20s, because you just find this slavish devotion. You are reading things that you've never read before. And I think up until reading The Bell Jar, I would have thought that was the case, but I took to it like I would have if I was 15, and so I thought that was quite an interesting point.
And you obviously read that more recently. You were a child.
Yeah,
And you read Catch-22 quite recently.
Well, I read it again. It's one of those books where I was grateful to my high school teachers who gave us books they knew we couldn't read. And this is what I tell kids in schools if I'm in a school and they're complaining about what they're reading in class, that we were given Catch-22. Our teacher knew we couldn't read it, but then I asked for it for my 19th or 20th birthday, then read it and loved it then. So they're just exposing you to these great books.
That's a perfect age for that book as well, I think. Yeah. It would be interesting to find someone in their 40s or 50s who'd never read Catch-22. And, I mean, how do you approach a book like that at that age? You know, and it's also having heard so much about it, often a book can be tainted by... Often you see them parodied a lot more before you read them. You know the in-jokes, you know the catchphrases, you know the quotes. How much harder is it to come to with all that cynicism in mind? I think it does tarnish it in some way.
The parody, the not very good film, all that stuff has really entered the zeitgeist and perhaps lost its charm.
So do you think it needs to be a zeitgeist thing, that it needs to say... I mean, to me, that's what, the Dice Man, where, you know, a psychiatrist basically decided, bored with his middle-class life, decided that he was going to allow the dice to decide everything he did. That was so much a book of the 70s.
I think a lot of the cult books seem to need to have an element of danger in them somehow. They seem to ignite people in a way that, I mean, obviously literature will always take you away from the monotony of your existence, but there's something about cult books, the people who write them, that there is a dangerous, reckless element to them that people are somehow drawn to, whether they are about war or suicide or, you know, drinking or taking your life into dice. Most
Australians pursuing anything of an artistic nature, I find, you know, they're in a culture that, you know, hates them for doing that, and no Australian artist gets any slack. So I love to find Australian books, especially published in the 70s, the authors, playwrights like Philip Motherwell, who wrote a book called Sideshow, which is about a bunch of artists in Carlton and Pran reading Rambo to each other as they shoot up heroin and shag each other in the shower and drive hot cars and steal petrol. Yeah, I find all that stuff really great.
Is that kind of dangerous or just life in?
I tried to read it again recently. It's this book, a double edition of book Mr. Bastard and Sideshow. It's very much of its time, but I think the publishing business in the 70s in Australia, small publishing, was heroic and dangerous. I loved it. Yeah.
Can big sellers, bestsellers, be cult, do you think?
I'm going to jump in here. I think The Lord of the Rings is the mother of all cult books, I think, because you can be in that cult and not even know you're in it. And sure, there are the people who dress up and do all of that, but then anyone in the audience here or out there, if you've ever tried your hand at a fantasy novel and put a map in the beginning, sorry, you may not think you're weird, but you are. and I know, because I've done it as well. And you're in the Lord of the Rings cult, in a sense. You have followed Tolkien and and you've become a part of it without even really knowing. That's how influential that book
Right,
is.
so the fact that it sold squillions is neither here nor there.
No, it's the level with which people love that book, and I think that's my big point in this, is that these sorts of novels, they're not just loved, they're loved intensely by people.
People get them tattooed on themselves, but you're right, people dress up and go to, have meetings about it, discuss hidden subtext, people...
Elvish dances, yes.
What they do in their own time is their own business. That's absolutely fine.
What do you think? I mean, taking the example of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which I mentioned, I mean, that was a book which holds the record, I believe, for a bestseller. Subsequently, it was rejected by 121 publishers. That's a pretty solid knockback.
More than Harry Potter.
More than Harry Potter even, and went on to sell 5 million.
Yeah.
But, so is it still cult?
But, well, because, I mean, then it disappeared, virtually, which is interesting. It had a mushrooming sale because it was the thing to read at the time, and it said all sorts of new things about where we were. And then suddenly it wasn't a book to pick up again. And I think the reason for that is that it didn't have the quality of writing of, say, Catch-22, which has had a longevity which is admirable. People are still picking up Catch-22, reading it, and discovering it for the first time. People aren't picking up Zen and the Motorcycle Maintenance.
Ah, so it's got to have longevity.
I think so.
I think, well, who's the Holden Caulfield character who keeps inspiring killers all over the years? J.G. Ballard's science
Catcher in the Rye
fiction
is one of the ultimate cult novels, surely.
Yeah, it's a teen kind of...
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's on school
thing.
syllabuses, so they're fairly contradictory. But do you think that being a bestseller disqualifies?
Yeah. I think bestsellers in most things, they just become too big and they become too exposed.
But books never...
Well, so numbers
books don't change the way that people do when they become bestsellers and exposed. Like, musicians that have huge selling albums then go on to make the difficult second album and make an album about... Not you, Dave, I'm not looking at it. But go on to, make an album about, hotel rooms, it's so hard being famous. Books don't...
Or Eminem's Rehab, permanently.
Books just exist in the way that they were when they were written. They can't get an ego problem. They don't embellish. They don't change. It's just the culture around them that changes.
Yeah.
So you can't blame the book just because people go and meet in cloaks.
But you do. I think the phrase you used was that it's damaged goods. Once too many people like it, it's just...
Well, that's a very underground way of looking at things.
Yeah, well, I went into my favourite bookshop in Melbourne and it was closed, but someone had left a note up there saying bestsellers will disappear like snow, but small pamphlets will live forever. And I thought, yes. I walked away with a skip.
Patently incorrect. Dickens, Shakespeare, the Bible, I mean, come on.
But
Robert Louis Stevenson.
let's talk about the authors, because it's not just the book. You mentioned the bell jar, and in fact, that was the only match between your list, was you mentioned the bell jar. Yeah. And that maybe is an example not just of a cult book, but a cult author.
But that's why I avoided it for so long.
Yeah.
Because I just saw the whole Sylvia Plath thing as just probably from knowing 15-year-old girls and being a 15-year-old girl, it just seemed tied to me with like Tori Amos records and and self-harming. I just thought, oh God, there's this whole lot of girls that are just going to sit around drinking wine and listening to bad music, and I'm Sylvia Plath. No, I am. And so I probably avoided it for that. I thought it was going to be this sort of slightly shrill, hysterical female book, and I was surprised at how funny it was. Really surprised.
Yeah. Oh, and it's so beautifully written. And the fact that she's a cult figure as well, I guess it helps to get into a book because there is that notoriety, but I don't think it has to be that way.
I would have thought you get extra points if you, one, write a cult book, but then as an author you either die beautiful and young or you retreat behind, heavy doors in New York and are never seen again.
Or you shoot your wife's head off at a party.
Yeah. That'd be...
Who
score.
was that?
William Burroughs.
That'd score, yeah.
That's... Right.
Tick.
I mean,
Actually, twice.
Is there something in that the author can add lustre? An author can make a book cult.
I have no doubt about that. I mean, Bret Easton Ellis, Selby Jr., Kerouac, they all lived exotic lives, and part of the attraction was we wanted to know more about the life of these people through their books. They're all lives that we couldn't aspire to, and for my part didn't want to, but I was fascinated by them.
But there's that difficult balance now because that a lot of authors have websites and personal profiles,
Yes.
and obviously have to do publicity and
Yes.
promo tours to keep that mystique, to keep that allure. It's a draining lifestyle. It's probably easier if you're not doing a promo tour for 3 months and going to all the writers' festivals. I know DBC Pierre certainly gives it a red hot go. Like, I'm crazy drunk. I'm just going to appear at writers' festivals with a glass of wine at 9 o'clock in the morning. So, but I just think he's a dying breed, unfortunately. That you
There's an obvious reason
but,
why.
I mean, but it's much harder to maintain that elusive rock and roll mystique when every aspect of an author's life has to be picked apart in weekend supplements, in order to sell the book.
I wonder, Dave, if this was one of the reasons that, a number of the other books you chose, well, the Eldershaw Barnard combo are dead, but also, the Point Blank was written in the 30s. They were mainly
Richard Stark,
30s noir books. In fact, frankly, I hadn't heard of any of them. I had to go and look them up.
Richard Stark wrote Point Blank and 20 other fast, published pulp books in the 60s, but his real name was Donald E. Westlake. And he wrote books under several names. And the pulp world is very good because it was like 10-cent books for people. It was trash. It wasn't coming through some critical avenue towards people. People just picked it up, and it was written for money. And there's a lot of great characters in it.
But is that partly because, apart from you obviously like the field, that none of those authors are going to go soft? Then none of them are going to appear on a morning talk show.
Well, a problem nowadays in many things, the audience is in control, and the audience is, asked what they want all the time, And I think artists should ignore the audience, and but they're all told all the time, don't do this, don't do that. The audience won't know, and by people who trying to corral artists into commodities. They say, don't scare the audience. We've got them here.
Yeah.
But the audience doesn't know anything. Really.
Sounds like politics.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. They're terrified of the audience and the readers. So these writers were actually allowed to be themselves in a way. Joseph Heller wrote his book by hand, didn't he?
And you get that feeling that there was a really critical review early on, which sounds like a compliment now, this book seems less written as shouted onto paper. And now you go, oh, how good is that? The sheer velocity of what he wrote.
Yeah.
And then it's as if he just went, right, here it is, keep up.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Yeah.
And
Up to the mark.
that idea of audience, he just blew it away.
Yeah.
OK, so do you think less of someone who doesn't share your passion?
Oh, they'd want to have a good bloody reason. It's not like I'm going to line people up out after the show, who doesn't like Catch-22. I think it's a good thing. It strengthens your view of the book in a way. It's sort of like you feel like, OK, if that person hates, in my case, Catch-22, it heightens my sense of being someone who gets it and someone who... And therefore I can love it. And so, yeah, it brings you in. And I think that's the attraction of these sorts of books, is that you have this intense personal relationship with it. And then you do find people who don't share it. But when you do find someone who does as well, it also brings you together. And,
yes, and so defines, in fact, it celebrates your own genius, really, doesn't it? Marie?
Yeah, no, I think a lot less of people if they don't. But I pretend like I still like them to their face. And I probably still like a lot of aspects of them, but there's that little slight distance that you just think, well, the friendship did reach a point. Has to part slightly. It's just if it's that important to you, then it.
You're still sulking over Ask the Dust by John Fante.
I sulk about that on a daily basis. Yes.
Dave.
Yes, I agree with Markus. It's very exciting to share something with somebody that you've both taken into you, and you've found it through ways that accident or serendipity. certainly not from mainstream kind of media, kind of novelty, charge that it might have. And you found something, you can talk about it at length. It is very, very special.
Yeah, and you like that person particularly.
For that moment, yes.
Look, I don't think less of people who haven't read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas because, why should they necessarily? But I think a lot more of those who have.
Let me ask you the reverse question, which is if you find out that someone you thought you liked has actually a secret yearning for, and I apologise for those I offend, but I nonetheless will, Chariots of the Gods, or maybe even Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which you would put into the cult category. What do you do then?
I love people who have weirdness like that, yes. I have many friends who incomprehensible love for things like that. I find it fascinating, yes,
If they love Jonathan Livingston Seagull, I would try very, very hard not to like them less, but I probably would.
Markus, would you judge?
Oh, you can only admire that level of obsession, especially, I think especially as a writer, because you feel like to write, I know personally I feel like to write a decent book, I do have to become obsessed with it in some way. And so I'll go for your life.
You're so nice.
If there was Jeffrey
nice.
Archer involved, if there was Jeffrey Archer love involved,
Yeah,
I would draw a line in the sand, I think.
And what if I told you, Marieke, that I came back from holidays and I'd been reading The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho?
No, I judge people on what they read. So, I judge their character on the books they love. So, people give you a list of the books they love.
So you're in big trouble.
Yeah. Jen's been in big trouble for a really long time.
That's right. Two last things. Does the quality of the writing really count?
If you're saying that can the romantic, myth of an author push a book forward with terrible writing, I think you're right, it's about the longevity. I mean, only for so far, for that mushrooming cloud, and then it will die.
It can't be appalling writing, but, I happen to really like the writing of Bret Easton Ellis, but I understand that not everybody does, and I thought American Psycho was the work of genius, but certainly not everybody does.
I think that's a perfect example, though. I was going to raise it myself because it's definitely a cult book, in my view, and in my opinion, you can't have a cult book that's badly written. I don't think you can have a badly written cult book, and I think that book, you can't say that.
Did I mention Chariots of the Gods?
That's not a cult book.
No, okay.
It's not a cult novel, anyway. But Bret Easton Ellis, whatever you think of his writing, it's arresting, it engages you, and you can't say it's bad writing. You might say, I don't like that style of writing, but I don't think you can say it's bad writing. And I don't think you can have a cult novel that is written badly.
Final question. Do you ever go back to your cult favourites? Or do you take the view, I shall not pass this way again, it was a perfect moment and it's gone? Markus?
At first I had a really hard line on this question, saying, no, you've got to be obsessed. You've got to keep going back and finding your favourite bits and reading it over and over again. But I can see that there are some books, I mean, for me, it's probably, and I'm not sure if it qualifies as a cult book, but I think Irving...
If you want it to be, it is.
OK, well, I'll plant the flag in the ground for The World According to Garp. And it's the sort of book, I think it's a cult book and it has this cult following, but, God, it's exhausting. And you get to the end of that book and you're exhilarated and but you're also spent. And so the thought of reading that again...
It's worth it. I've read it twice.
I couldn't. I'm with you. I couldn't.
And so, but it's... So it can go either way, I think.
OK. But you will keep reading Catch-22?
Yeah, I have to.
It's contract.
It's desperate.
My cult novels are rites of passage, on the whole, and they have their place, and I remember them with great affection, but there's too many other things to read, and, I don't go back to them. I don't feel like Markus that I had to go back and read Catch-22 again. I'm delighted that I read it once, and it had a huge effect on me when I did, but I want other experiences now, so I keep moving.
So it's an experience once had,
Yes.
Need not be repeated?
Yes.
But I think you said sometimes you've actually read enough of a book just to get the flavour of it and you don't need to finish it.
Yes, well, that's true too, yeah.
The Postman Always Rings Twice by James M. Cain. I've read a couple of times.
I know why.
Fast One by Paul Cain, who was billed as the 20-minute egg of hard-boiled writers. It's so fast that you never know what's happening at the end, and I've had to read it. It has a heroine in it who's so drunk that you never learn her second or first name. He ends the book with an ice pick in his back, driving at 100 miles an hour at the end.
I always go back. You go back with such a fondness, but you yearn for the moment that you first picked it up and you first opened it, and you grieve that moment a little bit. And I think, and sometimes you try and relive that moment in the eyes of other people when you give it to them. And when you give it to them and you clutch their arm and think, you're going to have this experience that I had, and you're going to enjoy it. Sometimes you just want to sit in the room with them like this when they're watching, which puts people off. I've tried it.
I would like to say a huge thank you to my guests. Thank you to Bob, to Markus, to Dave and to Marieke. Thank you so much. And until we meet on the first Tuesday of next month, very happy reading to you. Good night.